Hey there, do you struggle with reading? Because if you do, then we have something in common. Reading for me has been a struggle my whole life. And I want to just share some thoughts, wisdom, ideas, and some inspiration with you in the area of reading. Because whether you're a good reader or a not so good reader, it doesn't have to limit your goals. It doesn't have to prevent you from achieving your dreams. I promise you. You know, one of the things that I learned early on from Charlie Tremendous Jones, he taught me personally. He said, you will be the same person 5 years from now, except for the friends you have and the books you read. And you know what? I have found that to be true. My whole life, I have struggled with reading, right? And so I thought I would just share with you a little bit of my story, and maybe that could be a little bit of inspiration for you. I joke around now and say I've written more books than I've actually read, but that's not really true. I have read hundreds of books, but it doesn't come easy. Even today, I'm not a good reader. And you know what? I'm okay with it at this point. Here's what I do have control over, and that is my discipline, my grit, my desire to read books and to push through it, right? And that's what it really comes down to. But let me tell you, just back up for just a second. When I was a young boy, I was 9 years old. We lived in Germany at the time. I'm an Army brat. Our whole family lived over there. There are 8 kids in our family, so I'm number 2 of 8 kids. And I remember I would lay down at night on the lower bunk bed, and my older brother was on the upper bunk bed. And he would read before he would go to sleep. And when the light would go off, I would ask Steve, I would say, Steve, what did you read tonight? Tell me the story you read. You see, Steve is such a good reader. I think by the time he was 11 years old, he had read all the Hardy Boys and all the Nancy Drew books. And I envied that. I wanted to be like Steve because Steve would read. And then he would learn these great stories, and then he would share them with me. And I thought, wow, I don't need him to tell me the story anymore if I could just read myself. So I went to my mom. I said, Mom, I want to read like Steve. And she says, I'll do exactly what I did for Steve. I'll buy you your first book, and then every book after that, I'll buy you another book. And so I went to the bookstore. I was so excited to go. And I bought my first book. It was the Bobbsey Twins. I didn't want to copy Steve and get Hardy Boys or Nancy Drew. So I got the Bobbsey Twins, and I brought this book home that first night, and I was so excited to lay on the lower bunk while Steve was on the upper bunk, and he would read, and I would lay on the lower bunk bed, and I would sit there and read with him, and I was going to be so proud of myself. But I started to read and realized this was harder than I thought. I mean, I read. Here was the first page. This is the actual book I bought. There's the first page. I never got past the first page. I'm telling you, I read this book and I thought, okay, here we go. Who stole the coral turtle? Flossie Bobbsey asked her cousin Sandy Walter. Okay. We don't know, Sandy replied. That's why we asked you expert detectives to come here on your spring vacation. We want you to help us figure this out. Okay, look at that. I just messed up right there. I mean, that's what sometimes reading is like for me. I could not figure out. I'd read the first line, and then I would forget when I got down to the second and third line what the first line was talking about. And I had to go back and read the first line to understand, probably because I read so slow. And you know what? I'm not a great reader today. You can ask any one of my family members. I'm not great. We laugh about it. I'm okay with that because it's not a reflection of my self-esteem, and it shouldn't be a reflection of who you are, your individual worth. And you know what? Not being a great reader hasn't stopped me from writing books and writing training programs and speaking and so forth. I'm telling you, you can push through it. Well, everything changed for me in terms of a belief that maybe I could read because you see, by the time I was in 4th grade, they took me out of a social studies class every day and they put me in special resources. And so I went up to special resources to learn how to read, and they would have us sit down in these extra small tables, extra small chairs, and read cartoon books and then take a comprehension test when we were through. I tell you what, it annoyed me. I didn't like it. And eventually I locked onto the belief that I'm just not a reader. They're pulling me out of social studies, so I guess you're either born with it or you're not. And Steve obviously got the good gene. I didn't, therefore I'm not even going to try. And you know what? I never read past that point until I was 15 years old. Well, I was actually 16 years old. I was a junior in high school. But when I was 15 years old, I happened to walk in my dad's bedroom and there was a tape. And the tape was in my dad's handwriting, right? You remember what tapes are. In his handwriting, on one side it said, "The day that turned my life around," and on the other side it said, "How to live financially independent." We came from a big family. Finances were often a little bit tight. I took that tape. I went upstairs to the bedroom I shared with my brother as a 15-year-old, and I listened to that tape. And the man on the tape's name was Jim Rohn. And boy, I consider him in the personal development world my first teacher. Jim Rohn got me to think bigger on that tape than anyone else could have ever got me to think. I tell you, and one of the things that he said on that tape was, all leaders are readers. Well, I didn't like to hear that. All leaders are readers? Oh, that sounds so hard. Maybe I'll never be a leader. But my inner core said, no, you are unstoppable. I was listening to this tape. He says you could determine your own destiny. He says, here's the problem. If you're not reading, you're going to get rickets of the mind. He says every person making over $250,000 a year has a library. He said that would be a clue.
Wow, Schoaf was right. Get a library started. It'll change your life. Any home over $200,000 has got a library. Why do you suppose that is? Wouldn't that make you curious? How come every home over $200,000 has got a library? Does that tell you something? Does that educate you at all?
And I thought, wow, if that's true, then I've got to learn how to read. Well, I didn't rush out to go buy a book right away. I went and picked up another motivational tape at the time. And I took that tape and listened to that. I think it was by Zig Ziglar. And he said, all leaders are readers. Ooh, I didn't like to hear that. But you know what? It was like a drip, drip, drip. All of a sudden, I got the feeling and the thought, I'm going to have to work through this thing. I'm going to have to push through it. Just like recently with my daughter, who's a great basketball player. I love her. She's 12 years old. She does great. But I just ordered Masterclass, and on it has Stephen Curry teaching you how to shoot the ball properly. And he said early on, I don't remember what grade he was in, but early on he could barely get the ball up on the rim. So he stayed within the paint, and he said he would shoot from down here and thrust the ball up, and he knew that was not good form. So he said all summer long he forced himself to shoot properly, and that's what he did for a whole summer, and he changed his habit, if you will. Well, let me tell you something. If you're not a good reader, you may never be a fast reader. I'm not a fast reader, but here's what I know. Just like Stephen Curry, I know what it's like to improve. I know what it's like to work hard, to lock on a goal and drive toward it, and for that reason, I was a junior in high school at the time, and I decided I'm going to read my first book. And so I went to the bookstore and I found this book on the bargain shelf. And I thought, wow, this guy that wrote it, Hap Klopp, is the founder of the North Face company. Maybe there's some good stories in here. Besides, I like the word leadership. And so I took this book and I remember I flipped it open. I've taken a lot of notes in it over the years, but I read it. It took me 4 months to get through, but I was inspired. I tell you what, it took me a long time, but the stories were powerful. I'm telling you, he talked about all kinds of great things in this book and used rich language and rich stories. That was awesome. Well, I got inspired from that I went and bought my next book, which was Les Brown's book, my second book I ever read, because I didn't read my first book until I was a junior in high school. My senior year, I read, right? Live Your Dreams by Les Brown. I was blown away by that book. It took me a little while to get through, but it was full of inspiration. And I thought, wow, I can make my dreams a reality. And so from then on, I decided I'm going to be a reader. I'm not going to get rickets of the mind. Les Brown said that the average American, you said in there that the average American reads one book a year. And I remember hearing that and thinking, no, as Jim Rohn said, all leaders are readers. And I think you actually said that once too.
Yes. Right. Yes. One book a year. And it said in there, said that if you discipline yourself to read one book a month, in 5 years, when the average American read 5 books and you'd have read 60 books, that will make you an expert.
Wow. And so I took all that information and I thought I better start being a reader. And since then, I have read hundreds of books. Now, why do I share that with you? I share that with you just to say that no matter where you're at today, your past doesn't have to equal your future. Whether you're a great reader, a mediocre reader, or a poor reader, you can always work a little bit to be better, right? You can bring your poor readership, if you will, up to a manageable level, to an average reader. And that is what separates high performers, is that they will lock on a goal and they will persevere and they will have grit until that goal is achieved. And for me in my business, in the personal development world, it requires a lot of reading. And fortunately, because of technology today, I'm able to use Audible and listen to books all the time. I'll be on a run or I'll be driving down the road and I'll be listening to the latest book. And it's just powerful, powerful stuff. And so you could do the same thing. So if you've locked onto the belief like I had early on that, well, I'm not a reader, here's my only suggestion. You have not read something that inspires the soul. Don't lock on the belief that you're either born with it or you're not. Don't lock onto that belief. Believe that you're capable to do it. And if you drive toward that, right, whatever goals you have, I guarantee you can go to the library or you can go to a bookstore and you can find answers to your questions around achieving that goal through reading books. My hope for you in watching this video is that you will land on a desire to be a better reader, or at least read more books. If you're watching this and you're already a great reader, hey, thanks for enduring this message. Maybe this message wasn't for you, but maybe you could share it with someone where this could be a little bit of inspiration. Your reading ability doesn't have to stop you, but you must be willing to grow, right? When you're green, you're growing. When you're ripe, you rot, is what Ray Kroc said of McDonald's. So I'm going to suggest to you, you want to unleash your greatness within, read more. If you struggle with reading, that's okay. Read more. Figure out a way. Find books that inspire you. Find books that keep your attention and then read them. Maybe for you, it's a nonfiction book. Maybe for you, it's a fictional book. Maybe you get the first chapters in and you don't like the book. You don't feel a connection with the book. It's not keeping your attention. I'm not going to tell you to read the whole book. Go on to a new book that you enjoy, at least in the beginning. Don't burn yourself out. Read something that is meaningful to you, and you will find some enjoyment, and even if it's just the enjoyment, by gaining more knowledge. All right, I hope that was helpful to you. Just a reminder that you're unstoppable, no matter if you're a good reader or not. Now, go out, make a true decision, and go turn your dreams into reality. Unleash your greatness within. Hey there, thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. If you did, could you do me a favor? It would mean the world to me if you could write a simple review or give me a star rating. I would really, and I mean really, appreciate it. Thank you in advance. Now go out there and unleash your greatness within.
GreatnessWithin.com